Hello and welcome back to live coverage of the Lost Boys Lorcana Invitational. I'm Tandy, joined by Bomat. Say hi, Bomat.
Hi, Bowman.
And we're sponsored by TCGplayer.com. They're our flagship sponsor, and we want to say big thank you to them for helping us put on this wonderful event. We have one quarterfinal in the books. We saw Hall of Famer Frank Carson defeat former world champion of Magic the Gathering, Nathan Stoyer, in the first quarterfinal match. And then we watched Harlan Fear, fellow Lost Boy, complete game number 3 against one of our last chance qualifiers, Kurt Spies, and punch his ticket to the semis. And now we're going to be watching our other quarterfinal bracket. On our backup table, we're going to be having Mason Clark versus Matt Campo, and Matt Campo won our our last chance qualifier on Friday evening and went 3-0 in our first pod with one of the big
Yep.
bads of the format, Ruby Amethyst Control. And then Mason is part of Team NDA, 3 members into the top 8 with the Amber Sapphire strategy, and Harlan into the top 4. We'll see if we can make it a clean 3 for 3 into the top 4. That'd be pretty wild.
Yeah, they dodged each other in the first round,
Yeah.
but the field's going to narrow on them.
Yeah. In our primary feature match, we'll start off with Don DeLozier. Don is a well-seasoned Magic the Gathering player and won our Pioneer event at the Apex Gaming Home Store in Caldwell, Ohio, just month or so ago, and she brought Amber Steel Stitch Blitz to the Invitational. This deck we've seen quite a bit this weekend. Very aggressive starts, followed by singing things like A Whole New World, Stitch Rockstar to refuel. And then we also have the more interactive package of Tinkerbell Giant Fairy and Tiny Tactician to enable the shift so that we can interact with our opponents. This build specifically is utilizing Fire the Cannons alongside those Grab Your Swords to do chip damage to a bunch of opposing characters.
Yeah, we saw Frank Carson with a pretty similar list with a few differences. Instead opting for a single smash over these two Fire the Cannons, just some incidental removal that these steel players like to pack a couple copies of.
Yeah, Dawn was 3-1 yesterday in matches played and punched her ticket to the top 8 relatively early, all things considered. And her opponent this round is going to be no slouch himself, Brennan DeCandio. I'll say the team captain of NDA. Brennan
Yeah.
DeCandio was the one who convinced the other 2 members, Harlan and Brennan, Harlan and Mason, to play this Amber Sapphire Ramp Punzel deck. And he called it Blue Punch Buggy because of, I think in Lilo and Stitch, there was
Yeah.
a reference to Punch Buggy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like a 4 out of 10 Stitch impression, but we'll work on it.
Look, I've
But
only seen that movie one time. Give me a break. But this deck is centered around ramping effects, Grammatala, Mickey Mouse, Detective, as well as One Jump Ahead. And we're utilizing those with Bell Strange but Special to quest for 5, but also to enable those 7 drops, Stitch Carefree Surfer and Hades Infernal Schemer, much earlier and ahead of schedule. This deck is a lot more mid-rangey than what most of the Amber Steel Stitch Blitz decks are facing off against, and I'm curious to see if Don DeLozier's more hyper-aggressive version is able to take this one down. But the players are in the feature match area and ready to go. So let's head on down there and watch and see who takes it down in our second set of quarterfinal matches between Don DeLozier and Brennan DeCandio. Apologies on the graphics. We'll get those updated for you in just a second. There we go. On your left, Don DeLozier, Amber Steel Stitch Blitz. On your right, Brennan DeCandio with Amber Sapphire. And we are ready to go. Dawn should be on the play. She had a better record yesterday than Brendan DeCandio. She hit 3 wins a full round earlier, and so that grants her the play.
Yeah, this Amber Sapphire deck, one of the philosophies in building, Brennan told me, is willpower equals cards. Especially Stitch Carefree Surfer, one of the flagships of the deck with that 8 willpower, can be pretty hard for a steel deck to get through. But I am really curious to see whether Dawn's more aggressive version can get underneath all those large characters. There are not that many defensive tools in the early game for this Amber Sapphire list, but that's one of them, Stitch New Dog.
All right, so Brennan defends against the turn 1 Lilo with the turn 1 Stitch, New Dog, and now it's going to be up to Dawn to see if she has some sort of protective measure like Simba Cub, and she does. And we're going to quest for 2, get really aggressive here, and Dawn up 2-0 Brennan gonna need some help. His deck actually struggles a little bit against these aggressive starts that feature Simba Protective Cub, not playing anything like Philatides
Yep.
to help support those small characters to challenge up, and often having to run two smaller characters into a Simba to get it off the table, or even spending as much as a Let It Go to do it. I mean, you can see it's turn two. Brennan DeCandio already thinking, how do I beat this draw?
Yeah, Don might even have a second Lilo to follow up this first one, which could put Brennan pretty far behind. I talked to Dawn about her preparation and how she arrived at this deck, and she incorporated a lot of theory and decided that the mulligan system in Lorcana rewards two things: curve out aggro decks and A plus B combos, and realized that Lilo plus Simba kind of counts as both.
Yes, yes, yes. All right, we're gonna play Grammatala and Quest for One, and so it's 2-1. And now we're gonna go back Don DeLozier's way. Still protected is the Lilo from the opponent's characters, and we'll likely see Don deploy at least one, maybe two or three more characters this turn to continue that pressure. I see a hand that contains Aerial Spectacular Singer. That might be the play instead, but I think Don wants to push damage. I think she senses some blood in the water, and she wants to attack.
Yeah, there's a lot of Amber Steel in this metagame. Six players, three of them in our top eight, uh, meaning a lot of the time you don't want to go for these, multiple one drop starts, these weaker characters like Aladdin Cornered Swordsman, but it's a lot harder for Amber Sapphire to punish that.
Yes!
Here
Don
we
getting
go.
aggressive here, plays Lilo making a wish and Aladdin cornered swordsman, using that Simba to the best of her ability, and knows that Deckless of Brendan DeCandio knows that there's no rush character here, there's no sweepers here, and we're going low to the ground. We even inked a Stitch Rockstar, and it looks like we are just off to the races. Don here threatening 2, 4, 6, 7 lore next turn. Brendan likely going to double challenge into the Simba if he doesn't have much else, but he's got to figure out how he gets out of this over a two-turn sequence. But Grandma Tala going to the Inkwell could certainly help.
We saw Brennan laying down a few cards out of his hand there. I think he's working through which cards he can designate as ink over these next couple turns, and which he is definitely interested in playing.
Not Snipe with the sub. Thank you so much. Welcome to the family. Now, going to go back Brennan's way. We're going to use the extra ink. We're going to play one jump ahead and another Stitch New Dog, and we're going to continue developing our inkwell, but we need to be able to defend against these things that quest for two. Here comes Aerial Spectacular Singer, going to look for a song, and we find one right off the bat. We find two right off the bat. What do you want, Don? We're going to go for A Whole New World. That's going to allow her to wheel next turn if she so chooses, or if Brennan lets her, with the Aerial getting to ready. And then Dawn here going to probably quest for 6. Curious if she wants to ink anything, that Aerial or the Stitch New Dog.
Yeah, I think I kind of like adding to the board with this extra stitch here. Definitely want to quest. It's pretty hard for Amber Sapphire, like you said, to punish this early questing. The stitch is gonna get to trade off for a couple Lilos over the course of a couple turns, but they've gotten so much lore in that you can't really be too upset about that.
Right. And I think Dawn is contemplating, the trade of, do I sacrifice both of these Lilos and a little bit of board position for lore? The answer is usually yes, especially when you know the matchup and you know how Brennan's avenue to victory lines up. It's going to take a while, and without sweepers or things with rush, he's going to need a lot of things like Let It Go and Hades Infernal Schemer to check these things.
If you slow down now, you're kind of opening yourself up to one of the options for Brennan, which is getting to the point where he can play multiple characters in a turn. And over enough time, that can kind of turn into a sweeper-like effect, right? Getting to challenge multiple times. So I think Dawn needs to keep up the pressure here. We do see the inked Ariel and the Stitch New Dog.
All right, and there it is. We're going to quest for 6. Up to 11 is Dawn, and Brennan's got his work cut out for him. Let's see what he's got.
Yeah.
5 characters on the other side. The Simba is technically in the graveyard. It looks kind of like it's in play, but it's not. Just to let you at home know the situation. The Stitch New Dog from Brennan can challenge one of these Lilos and knock it off, but we're still looking at 2, 4, 5, 6 lore next turn, potentially, if there's no removal spell from Brennan. And there's not. We're just going to play a Hades and then a Stitch New Dog, and we're going to try to develop that away to defend, but we're going to still need some help. Let's go back Don DeLozier's way. We're going to deploy some more threats this turn and probably cast A Whole New World.
Yeah, could also definitely see Dawn holding off. But inking the Simba definitely signifies a whole new world is coming down. Brennan getting ready.
Yep. And
Uh,
I mean, Don knows that there's no sweepers in Brennan's deck, right? This Amber Sapphire deck doesn't have access to anything like that. So
yeah,
if she wants to wheel and draw 7 and then deploy 2, 3, or 4 more characters after the wheel,
exactly.
Brennan's dead. There's no way out.
Yeah, Dawn's gonna get to quest up to 16 eventually. Here comes the wheel.
All right, discard 2 for Brennan, discard none for
Ooh,
Don. Fire the cannons as a pickup and a grab your sword.
the
So
grab your sword is what I'm looking at. That
okay,
is a full wipe. You don't even need to play characters if you
yeah.
just quest with these and get rid of Brennan's board.
Yeah, I don't think that he has any way to stop this, and all these characters are going to go. We're going to gain 2, 4, 5 up to
16.
16.
And Brennan can only answer one character
Right.
out of all the cards in his deck with only this much ink.
All right, we
That'll
pack it
do
in.
it.
One thing I love about Brennan is how aware he is of his position at all times.
Yeah.
And we watched a lot of matches over the last 2 days before the top 8 where players who were dead and were 0% after the turn, no matter what they did, would still play the full turn, thinking, tanking, trying to figure out how to not be dead.
Yeah.
Brennan, no, I'm out. You win.
Yeah.
As these players are shuffling up here for game number 2, let's go and take a look at the player profile for Dawn DeLozier. Dawn has been killing it in Magic recently. She recently won an Apex Invitational qualifier here at the home store in Caldwell, Ohio. She's an editor for the Squadron Hawks Magic team, and she has 2 NRG Series top 8s, and that's only over like the last 2 years, so she's doing quite well. Her favorite Disney movie is Mulan. She's a huge fan of all trading card games. Faves are Netrunner and Arkham Horror. Wonder if she's ever played Magi Nation. That was my favorite game from
Yeah,
the
you're the only one I've
2000s.
ever heard talk about this,
Yeah,
but you did love that game.
maybe
Right?
it was a regional thing. Maybe they were based in like Atlanta, and then it was just like the Southeast had a bunch of
Sure.
access to the product. But she also is a former debate team kid, and recently got a kitten named Murky. Hey, Murky, how's it going?
You know,
Her
Murky
opponent.
short for
What?
Murktide.
Murktide? That makes sense. There's a bunch of characters in Hearthstone Battlegrounds that revolve around the term Merc because of
Murlocs.
Murlocs.
Yeah.
There's Murkai, Young Murky, things like that. Let's check out her opponent in this round. No slouch to Magic the Gathering, but new to Lorcana and very high up on the ladder for Pixelborn. And we're looking at Brennan DeCandio, who's a proud father and husband. 3-time SCG Tour champion, often teaming up with 2 of my best friends, Tana Grace and Ross Miriam, and they had a lot of success in the team events. Never quite got a trophy, but had quite a few second places, and that was often a point of poking fun at the
Yeah,
Tana
I was gonna
Grace.
say I bet
Yeah.
Tannen and Ross hear about that a lot.
Brennan worked at Direwolf Digital for the card game Eternal for some time. If I'm not mistaken, actually worked with another friend of mine, Patrick Sullivan, former commentator for the SCG Tour, along with Cedric Phillips. Fun facts, favorite Disney movie, Aladdin from 1992. That's one of my favorite Disney movies as well. Loves gardening and home improvement projects, and his favorite Disney character, Stitch. Well, he's playing a bunch of Stitches in his Amber Sapphire deck. Let's see if Stitch can help him out here in game number 2. Let's head on back down to the feature match area and see if these players are ready for game number 2. Mulligans are just about concluded, and when they are, we will be underway for game number 2 in our second set of quarterfinal matches. Dawn DeLozier won that game number 1 with her Amber Steel Stitch Blitz. Hyper-aggressive start, played roughly 6 characters in the first 4 turns, and able to just run rampant over Brennan DeCandio. His deck ramping up for those big baddies, but not quite that adept at interacting with the Lilo into Simba draw.
You mentioned you described Brennan as maybe newer to Lorcana. I would say that's only true in the context that all of us are new to Lorcana.
Right, that's what I meant.
Brennan has more games on Pixelborn than pretty much anyone I know, and his teammates are well aware of that.
All right, here's a stat I heard from Harlan last night.
Yeah.
Harlan, outside of Brennan, Harlan says he thinks he has 3 times as many games of Lorcana as the rest of the field combined, except for Brennan. And then Brennan has 3 times as much as he does.
Yeah. Brennan, for almost the entire time I've been playing Lorcana, Brennan has been tearing it up on Pixelborn, getting in a ton of testing, trying out a bunch of new decks, and has arrived at this Amber Sapphire deck that's been really impressive all weekend.
Well, he did waffle a bunch, and he did test a bunch, but this deck had quite a good win rate on the ladder, and all 3 of them tested against, basically everything they thought they would fight off against. Things like Amber Stitch Blitz, Ruby Amethyst, some of those other off the beaten path strategies, but the numbers don't lie. When you're playing 1,000 games and you win 800 games, like
Yeah,
that's the deck. That's the deck.
yeah. We mentioned it earlier, but Dawn got up to such a fast start that Brennan was never able to play a Carefree Surfer. But Stitch Carefree Surfer is kind of the flagship of this build. They're trying to maximize that card, play it as early as possible, and hope that other decks have a difficult time dealing with it.
All right, both players leading off with Stitch New Dog. Brennan gonna one jump ahead up to 3. Dawn gonna go ahead and play the Protective Cub, which could be troublesome for Brennan. We'll see if he wants to trade the Stitch New Dog into it and then get it back with something like Hades, or if he has some other play like Bell Strange with Special.
So right now in Lorcana we have just the one set, the first chapter. So past that first exceptional one drop and Lilo making a wish, if you really want to be aggressive, everything else is kind of the same. There's upsides. Captain Hook is a good defensive card. Stitch can be shifted onto, but all of these one drops that just quest for one are significantly less potent when you're putting them behind a Simba.
All right, DeCandio gonna go ahead and play the Bell Strange with Special, and then ink a Rapunzel as well as a BR Guest. So we're up to 5 ink on his turn and can get up to 7 next turn for Carefree Server or Hades Infernal Schemer. A very fast start for him, but also a common start. This is kind of how they built the deck, to always be able to go, ramp effect early into another ramp effect into a 7-drop well ahead of schedule.
Yeah, and Bell is one of their tools against part of the Amber Steel strategy in A Whole New World in particular. If Brennan has a Bell down, any Whole New World has a pretty good shot of benefiting him more than his opponent. Just being able to lay down as much ink as possible and play those bigger cards.
Dawn here, considering her options, but she has the ability to challenge Simba on Stitch. I think she wants to play around the potential for a removal spell on the Simba into both of the opposing characters from Brennan being able to challenge her characters. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see Simba just kind of eat the Lilo for free, or eat the Stitch for free. But what also happens a lot of times is you just want to make sure Carefree Surfer doesn't get online.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to make that happen because 2 more ink drops for Brennan would put him right at 7. So with the perfect hand, he could get down either of those 7 drops.
All right, here's Ariel, Spectacular Singer, and musical debut does find the draw 7. Not something that she necessarily wants to cast this game, just because of how devastating it can be against a Bell Strange but Special, thanks to all the extra ink drops. Dawn did go 1, 2, 3 here, but not quite as explosive with either the lore generation or the number of raw characters played in the first few turns. And Brennan, with the early ramp effect and the 1-drop, able to potentially threaten some defense here against the draw from Dawn.
Yeah, I mentioned Brennan maybe being able to play a Carefree Surfer this turn, but I said with the perfect hand. And we see he has that Carefree Surfer, has another inkable card, but then has an uninkable Hades Lord of the Underworld, meaning he can't get to 7 this turn without, inking that Carefree Surfer. And there's a kind of a knock-on effect of Dawn deciding not to take down the Stitch and deciding to sit back. Brennan no longer has a target for that Hades Lord of the Underworld, so he's just going to play it out.
Well, this is something that I talked to Harlan and Brennan about over the last 24 hours. Their deck, they have things like Hades that can gain some value, but in some situations you just have to play them for no value, because the future Hades, to get back the first one, kind of makes up for the loss of not getting a card back then, and the body being able to challenge is quite strong. Now, one really backbreaking thing here potentially for Dawn is something like Grab Your Sword. I don't think she has access to it, but if she finds it off this Ariel Spectacular Singer that she's about to play, could shatter Brennan's board position, taking out the Hades and the Stitch New Dog, but that will open up Rapunzel as a refresh and a resource generator.
Yeah, you saw Brennan jamming this Hades for no value, prioritizing instead holding onto that Rapunzel in hand, thinking at some point Dawn is going to leave a character exposed just like this, and Brennan will be able to get some damage on a Bell and draw multiple cards, which is how he can actually start powering through this lack of ink in his hand.
All right, Rapunzel going to come in and heal up Simba Protective Cub and draw 2 cards. We've already played an ink, but we can play a song. I don't... Oh, I do see a Grab Your Sword. Do you want to sing that just to kill the Hades? I'm kind of into it, if I'm honest.
I don't know. Part of the... helps a little, but I think you can get better value off of Grab Your Sword. Brennan's characters are going to be large, especially past this point in the game, but we've still seen effective Grab Your Swords at just laying down a lot of damage, and the damage of the metaphorical damage is kind of already done here. Your Stitch is exposed, you can't take down the spell, so if Brennan does have a Rapunzel, it's going to be able to come down.
Alrighty, well, Dawn, trying to figure out if she wants to sing Grab Your Sword off the aerial. That will knock off the Hades, but it'll put 2 damage on the bell, and that unlocks Rapunzel to heal and draw some cards. It will keep the Simba Protective Cub alive for another turn, so I do kind of like doing it, and that also allows you, I think, to quest with the Lilo and gain 1, or the Stitch and gain 1.
The texture of this game right now, this was a lot more common among most of the games we saw yesterday, where players get past the early turns and get into this kind of posturing state where players don't really want to, use their characters very much, and it's just about accruing value, accruing value. And the first few games we've seen today, by contrast, Dawn with a very fast start and Frank with several very fast starts against Ruby Amethyst, those you can only really take advantage of when you have either Lilo making a wish or we saw Frank shifting Stitch on turn 4. Outside of starts like those, you kind of get forced into these mid-range matchups, which Amber Steel does have the tools to deal with.
Alright, Dawn, gonna need to make a play here, even if it's just past the turn. Questing or singing with Ariel is on the table. We're gonna sing. 2 damage to the Hades. I think this is the right play, but it's a hard one to make. We're going to quest for 1 up to 2. We're going to go back Brennan's way. I always try to think to myself, will my opponent be happy or sad if I do this thing? And I think that if I'm Brennan, I'm pretty sad if my opponent sings a Grab Your Sword there and kills my Hades. Obviously you get to do the Rapunzel thing, but like, if you do that, you're not challenging the Simba. You're not getting the Ariel off the table, and so it's sung Whole New World still at the ready next turn. So I like it. I like the play from Dawn. Here it is. Rapunzel heals Belle, and now we got maybe some more ink drops from the Belle.
Yeah, there's a Grammatella, a Let It Go, and 2 Stitch Carefree Surfers. So Brennan kind of has a lot of options here as far as how this hand can lay out.
Alright, gonna ink a Carefree Surfer and a Let It Go, and then we're gonna play a Grammatella. And preparing for a Carefree Surfer next turn from hand. Might not be enough. We're going to go back Dawn's way and see what she wants to do. Only one card in hand for Brennan, so unlikely that she's going to deploy that Whole New World since she is ahead on cards and ahead on board, kind of.
Yeah, we have seen even in spots almost like this, the Ember Steel players can get crafty, finding ways to empty their hands and turn a Whole New World into a good card, but Dawn is kind of significantly ahead. It'll take a couple turns, maybe the board state shifts in that direction. But here's Ariel Spectacular Singer, a miss. Happens frequently enough.
Yep, you only usually play about 12 songs in most of these builds, and so I think Frank said 60 something percent. I'm not sure exactly what the number is. And while you do miss quite often, it's the Singer 5 that is the big draw for Ariel Spectacular Singer, because you're able to play something on 3 that sings something that costs 5, and those 5 cost songs are often brutal, especially ahead of schedule. One of the first games I ever played with the Stitch Blitz deck when we put it together for Lost Boys Versus, I went the 1, 2, 3 with Ariel Spectacular Singer, and on turn 4 I went to play another character, sing Whole New World, play 2 more characters, and damn if you weren't just dead.
Yeah, that was it. You mentioned that maybe not 60%, whatever the actual number is, that Frank determined. Getting that data is kind of half the battle, but the other half is deciding what number you're happy with.
Right.
And as far as Ariel, players have decided they're happy enough to hit, that most of the time you hit, but frequently you miss because the card is good enough on its own. Whereas different cards you might just not want to put in your deck at all if they're going to be below 90, 95%.
All right, Don going to spray the board with characters. We're going Stitch, New Dog, Lilo making a wish, and Ariel spectacular singer that miss, and now we're just gonna go questing. Dawn choosing not to sing the whole new world because she is way ahead on board, and Brennan is very low on resources from hand. Has access to a lot of ink. We'll see if he's able to posture with the Bell Strange but special over multiple turns to potentially threaten big lore generation and force Dawn to have some weird answers.
Yeah, Brennan's previous turn, he got some good value, able to draw a couple cards off the Rapunzel, develop multiple ink, and get this Grammatala down. But the downside of turns like that, you're not adding a whole lot of strength to the board, and Dawn is taking advantage of that here, questing with plenty of characters, developing plenty more, saying, sure, you can challenge these, but not quite as much as the value I'm getting out of them.
All right, so Grammatala looking to go headfirst into the Simba Protective Cub, and that'll send her to the Inkwell. Bell, Strange but Special, can also go into the Simba and finish it off, and I think that's probably going to be the play. I wouldn't be surprised to see Brennan not attack with the Bell because he thinks that maybe questing for 5 with Bell is like the only way I can win.
There
and
he goes.
that is. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and gain up to 10 Lord as Brennan DeCandio, thanks to the Bell Strange with Special. Let's get the Bell Strange with Special on the screen and talk about this card a little bit. Bell Strange with Special, a 4-cost Sapphire character that is only a 2/4, so it's not very big, but it does quest for 5 down the line. If you're able to hit 10 ink, and thanks to her own ability, you get to play an extra ink every turn. This was maybe the biggest chase rare out of the first set in the first 2 weeks. I think people really thought that it was going to be something truly magnificent, and end up being just pretty good, but Sapphire in general was a little bit lackluster, I thought.
Yeah, I described Bell early on as narrow but powerful, where there are other more broadly powerful cards like Rapunzel in the set, but and then my opinion kind of revised downward on Bell relative to other players, but I really like what Brennan and his team have done here in finding a good shell for Bell. For one thing, they're able to get a lot of ink and a lot of card draw, which you need to fuel Bell off these Carefree Surfers, but also the addition of Hades, Lord of the Underworld, means after your first Bell dies, you can bring it back 1, maybe 2 times and get 5 lore out of it each of those times to kind of cross the finish line.
All right, we're going to sing Grab Your Sword. This is a nice start for Dawn. We're going to deal 2 to everything, and now we're going to try to figure out what the rest of the turn entails. We can sing a Whole New World, draw 7, and then redeploy a bunch of characters while potentially challenging 2 of the characters on Brennan DeCandio's side. We can also just ignore it because Brennan currently isn't threatening lethal 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, only 19. And if Dawn goes quest, that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, up to 15. She actually has initiative here.
Yeah, being able to sing a Whole New World here, I think is a pretty good spot. Brennan's deck not going to be able to punish Dawn for going wide after this Whole New World. Though I do think some challenging is in order. You did count Brennan going up to 19, but after this Whole New World, if Brennan found a rock star, that would put him to exactly 20 after a shift.
Fair enough.
So if Dawn's cognizant of that, she'll want to take down the spell at least this turn, but she should have enough to win the game on the following turn.
Yeah, a new dog trade into it seems fine. She could also hit one of her 2 Fire the Cannons, or perhaps another Grab Your Sword off of the big wheel. I see a hand. It looks like a couple of Tiny Tacticians, a couple of Lilo making a wish. I imagine we're going to go just new dog into Bell, play 3 characters, quest for 6 past turn, I think, or 7, Just,
Yeah, Lilo is kind of perfect off a Whole New World in this matchup. Your opponent doesn't have any ways to incidentally remove it with cards like Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, and it's just the most efficient way in the game, really, to get lore onto the battlefield.
All right, Dawn up to 13, and now can play Lilo.
Wow. I didn't see the second Lilo.
Yeah. Then Tinkerbell Tiny Tactician, and I think that'll be it, but I think that'll be enough. We're going to go back to Candio's way. We got 2 challenges potential here, and then we have 7 cards in hand, and we're going to draw up to 8. So, could have a couple of removal spells. We'll see if it's enough. Brennan knows he's on the back foot, though. His hand looks like You Have Forgotten Me, some ramp, Robin Hood.
Yeah, even in the best case scenario here, Brennan inks 1 more ink, plays 1 more ink, would get him up to 11, and 11 is not enough to play a Hades plus a Let It Go. So Brennan can't play multiple interactive cards from hand. I guess 2 Let It Go, but even that might not be enough with only 2 characters.
He also
challenge it.
has no interaction.
Exactly. Yeah.
8 cards, no Let It Go, no Hades Infernal Schemer, and I don't think either would be enough at this juncture either. So looks like Don DeLozier is going to beat Brennan DeCandio, captain of Team NDA, putting 3 members into the top 8 with that Amber Sapphire strategy. He's trying to line up some attacks to see if there's any shot of him getting out of it. Unfortunately,
Looks like the first member of Team NDA getting what's the word, eliminated. First time we've seen a member of this team eliminated all weekend.
Yeah. They brought this really unique Amber Sapphire ramp strategy, and it's been great at fighting through the more mid-rangey and slow decks. And unfortunately for DeCandio, can't quite handle the aggressive start from the Amber Steel. Stitch Blitz. Got blitzed.
Blitzed.
Happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
Congrats to Don DeLozier, your next semifinalist, and we have 3 of 4 semifinalists.